Cortlandt Park for the next 20 or so years. Not that 20 years should be taken literally, but for a substantial period of time. The master plan was put together over the last couple of years by Charles McKinney from the Parks Department, who's here tonight. Came before the Parks and Recreation Committee in October of last year, presented the master plan. We had a thorough question and answer period then, spent about 2 hours on that issue back in October. Charles came back in March for a committee meeting when we had hoped to address the master plan in detail again. Because we had a very full agenda that night, we spent only about a half hour on the subject. But in April, we came back to our committee once more, and we did, again, have a very substantial agenda, but nonetheless, we spent close to 2 hours, again, on the master plan presentation, questions and answers. So the first thing I'd like to say to everybody who's not on the Parks and Recreation Committee is that this issue has been before that committee and has been quite thoroughly discussed. As the master plan itself, it's a long document, 80 some odd pages. I'm not going to attempt to go through it in any way, shape, or form, but it does a number of things. It recommends a number of things, many of which have been priorities of this community board for some time. For example, it proposes pedestrian bridges in Van Cortlandt Park, which would improve the circulation in the park and make it possible to walk around the park, which right now is an enormous challenge, to say the very least. And of course, one of those pedestrian bridges over the Major Deacon Expressway has been an endeavor of this community board for some time. In the art section of Van Cortlandt Park, that's most adjacent to Community Board 8, there's a proposal for a playground in North Riverdale. There's a proposal to install that restroom at the parade grounds on 51st Street. That's been a priority of this community board for some period of time. It would address the problem of the Norway maples, an invasive species which are crowding out other species and destroying the health and ecology of the forest in the park. The invasive vines, the highways opened up all this parkland to invasive vines, and they have been taking over. The Department of Parks does a terrific job of trying to keep this problem under control, but it's a difficult problem. Parks would work with the DEP on a proposed blue belting of Tibbetts Brook to bring that brook completely above the ground, put it into Van Cortlandt Park, into Van Cortlandt Lake, I'm sorry. Right now there is a sewer on Broadway that empties into Van Cortlandt Lake. We want to try to get that rerouted so that it's not coming into the lake. The hope would be that someday the lake would eventually get down to the Harlem River. And a whole bunch of other issues. I mean, it's a very ambitious and I think quite remarkable plan. Charles met for 2 years with various user groups in the process of putting together this master plan. Just a couple more things to say and then we'll get to the resolution. The master plan is consistent with the 197A plan that the community board adopted 10 years ago. The master plan is supported by the Van Cortlandt Park Conservancy, and it is also supported by the Friends of Van Cortlandt Park. And as you have heard me say before about parks projects, there is no funding. All of these capital projects that are in here are unfunded. Funding would have to be raised for specific projects, and those projects will come back before the committee and before the community board if and when the funding is raised. So, this is, as I say, a vision. It's a vision without any money behind it, and that's obviously a major step that would have to be taken. So that's background that I felt was necessary for everybody to have so that we can address this resolution. So the resolution you have in front of you, as a consequence of conversations that took place at the executive committee a week ago, I've made a couple of changes to the wording in the resolution, and I just want to read those changes to you. The Parks and Recreation Committee of Bronx Community Board 8 endorses the Van Cortlandt Park Master Plan with the understanding that the services of the trails in the master plan will be, and this is where the wording changes, permeable, non-toxic, and flexible. We're taking out the word natural because on some of these surfaces, as I understand it from Charles, synthetic materials have to be used, synthetic binder or something specific. And you can ask me any question except what is a synthetic binder, because I have no idea. So the language would read, the master plan will be permeable, the surfaces of the trails in the master plan will be permeable, non-toxic, and flexible, and will meet the standards for adjacent wetlands, and that the Department of Parks and Recreation will return to the Community Board when individual capital projects in the master plan are in the scoping phase. So we took out the rather vague language that some members of the executive committee pointed out was vague, and we made it specific. The scoping phase is the first phase for any parks capital project. It happens when the various, the funder, members of the committee, and the community board, local elected officials come together, and the project is described on site. We did one of these last fall with the proposed skateboard park in Daytona Park. So this is the earliest possible stage for these projects to come back to us.
Bob, you've taken out maximum extent feasible as well?
Yes, we have taken out the maximum extent possible because I think that the language at this point is as clear and specific as it could be. The one thing I want to point out: synthetic does not mean toxic. These are synthetic materials, but the language remains permeable, non-toxic, and flexible.
Okay. Discussion on the motion. If you should direct your comments to this motion. Yes.
Well, was anything taken out that was discussed and put in at the Parks meeting that we voted on? For instance, anything that someone may have said, well, I like this, and you changed it, and then now it's been taken out. Has any of that happened?
Well, we were still finalizing the language with regard to the trails at the Parks Committee meeting. And in fact, we discussed it at the Executive Committee meeting, and now we've made a further change at this point. So, for example, as I say, taking out the word natural and putting the word synthetic.
So this is the only changes?
Well, the changes are the changes that I just read. Yeah. Those are the changes.
Is there further discussion?
I think the language for the trails, I think that's excellent, and the plan has so much to recommend. I want to point out a few things that I have concerns with, and that's why I abstain. For example, the plan mentions changes to Broadway as well as the sidewalk for Van Cortlandt Park. And I noted that in some places in Manhattan, when you have this kind of change, it actually changes the parking or traffic lanes on Broadway. So I asked the question, but time did not allow. How does this master plan, you approve a master plan, and then does this mean that something comes back and bites you? Because this clearly is not in the Parks Committee, to discuss changes on Broadway. Something else that did come up on...
Well, let me speak to that, Laura.
Yeah.
Any changes that would be made, one of the things the master plan addresses is some of the problems of accessing the park. For instance, Jane Cortlandt South and Vale.
This is the street of
the street itself.
Yes.
That's the traffic and transportation.
Exactly, but it's in the master plan.
But Bob,
That's the point I'm making. Yeah.
can I just clarify,
Yeah.
Bob, does the master plan empower the parks to supersede any other agency regulatory review?
No, of course not. It proposes, it points out the difficulty of getting into the park and various highway entrances and exits, but all those issues, if anything were to be done, would come back to the traffic and transportation committee.
Okay, because,
Okay, remember to confine and direct your comments to the resolution because the motion is on the floor. Resolution is
I
on the floor.
understand that, but there's something else that was discussed in committee and bringing up that wasn't in the resolution, and that is the 5 access points to Yonkers. For example, I have concerns about that. This is why I abstained, and I probably will have to abstain again because in speaking with the 5-0 and speaking to residents of Broadway, many years ago, there might have been some access. I mean, the park has no wall around it or fence around it. People get in how they get in. But as was noted in the committee, Yonkers residents can go to Yonkers facilities, Bronx residents need a permit to go to Tibbettsville Park, and to open up, when, you know, what our 5-0 said to me was that there would need to be increased security, because many years ago, there were a lot of public safety issues related to Yonkers and Van Cortlandt Park and being able to police. So I was wondering, you know, I read it in the plan like that, I thought, you know, we haven't really thought about this, the committee was not happy with this idea, but, you know, there are several things in that we
Well,
just
all right, so
didn't
let's,
discuss.
so with respect to Yonkers, exactly as you pointed out, right now there is access to and from the park between Yonkers and Van
Yes.
Cortlandt. Unlike Tibbettsbrook, which is, I don't know exactly how far up it is, a mile and a half, 2 miles up from Yonkers, Van Cortlandt Park is literally on the Yonkers border. People go in and out of the park all the time.
But there's a new access.
Right, the proposal
New
is-
access points.
Right.
I know the situation.
And the thinking
I
behind
can see
it,
the point.
well, that's what I'm trying to explain. The thinking behind that is that since people from Yonkers are using the park right now, it's to try to give them an entrance, to give them some sense of ownership or buy-in, to make them feel more responsible, more committed to Van Cortlandt Park. You know, will that actually turn out to be the case? I have no idea.
Well, it wasn't-
But it's a real.
Can I ask a point of information? Will the proposed park entrances be brought before the Parks Committee at the moment it's scoping?
If there is any, right, if there is any sort of formal entrance, again, that will come back.
But better to tell them sooner rather than later that for us, there's hundreds of items here that is not a priority. Okay, and my last point, because there are many things to recommend it, but much was said about projects that would be calling on volunteers to maintain. And this just set a red flag for me, because volunteer labor is difficult. The Friends and Conservancy do a fabulous job with the volunteers they have, but new projects, we never got to ask what kind of, I'm not talking about a community garden, because it just seemed that there were a lot of projects in the plan that said volunteers would be needed to maintain them, and, you know, that could be difficult. I just want to point it out for the record that, you know, sooner rather than later, that maintenance is a big issue
Maintenance, let me say two things. Maintenance is a big issue.
for a lot
It
of
has-
projects.
It has
Not
always been.
volunteers, please.
Right. Maintenance has always been the number one expense priority of the Parks and Recreation Committee, always. Maintenance in the park is inadequate, it's always inadequate, it should be a lot better than it is. Friends of Van Cortlandt Park, which is a volunteer group, put together with the New York, New Jersey Trails Conference in 2009, a trails improvement project. There were 27 items on that project, and Christina Taylor told me tonight that 7 of those projects have gone through, and that's all volunteer labor. So it is possible with volunteer labor, if it's done properly, to make some really significant contributions to the park. It can't be everything.
Your
but it
questions
can be.
and the answers have to be extremely succinct. We have exactly 5 minutes to leave this room. Dan?
It's a very quick question. Is there any harm in bringing this back to committee to draw these issues out?
We spent 2 hours in October.
I know, and I was in the last meeting.
Is that-
I'm asking, is there any harm?
I don't
in
think
bringing
there's
it back?
any need. I think we have discussed this issue thoroughly. And, you know, we could go on asking questions forever. The important thing to remember here is that these capital projects are going to come back to us. They come back to us at the scoping stage, the earliest stage.
Okay.
Call the question.
Call the question. Second. All those in favor?
And that's a vote on calling the question.
Yes. All those opposed? Any abstentions? Carries unanimous. One abstention. I'm calling the question. We'll now entertain the motion on the floor. All those in favor of the motion? We're going to do a read-through again. I apologize, everybody. Sylvia Alexander. Steve Balliser. Robert Bender.
Yes.
Brendan Conti.
Yes.
Anthony Creaney. Lisa Dowd.
Yes.
Margaret Donato. Paul Ellis.
Yes.
Robert Finizzi, yes. Arlene Feldmeyer. Anthony Fella,
Yes.
Beverly Fettman, Phil Friedman, Steve Fruit,
Yes.
Marvin Galvin, Rosemary Ginty,
Abstain.
Marvin Goodman,
Yes.
Michael Heller,
Yes.
Maria Curie,
Yes.
David Kornblum,
Yes.
Irving Latimer,
Yes.
Dana Lennon,
Yes.
Rita Lowe,
Yes.
Sergio Marquez,
Yes.
Charles Merling,
Yes.
Amy Moore, Dan Paternak,
Yes.
Lamont Parker, Karen Pesh,
Yes.
Skip,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
James, Bradley. Press said yes. Zach, James, Rather,
Yes.
Julie,
Yes.
Zaxia,
Yes.
Georgia,
Yes.
Gary,
Yes.
Mercedes, Laura, Bill, Sergio Villaverde,
Yes.
Marty,
This one?
and Herb. Thanks. Motion carries. Bob, would you mind surrendering the remainder of your report? Except for the announcement you have to make about Saturday?
Yeah, two things, very quickly. This Saturday, we're doing It's My Park Day at the Marble Hill Playground because it is part of the Bronx. 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. We'd love to have volunteers. If you can make it, even if you can make it for an hour. You don't have to be there for the whole time. Anytime you can give us.